Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and I am going to call the WSESD board meeting to order. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and to participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So, I'm going to ask if there are any motions to amend the agenda. Seeing none, we are moving on to student matters. Do we have any students in the,
Laura's in the Zoom.
Okay.
I'm also here.
Oh, Jaden.
do either of you wish to present to the board any questions, concerns, anything? We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I feel like in our school, I feel like we need more time to socialize. I noticed that when I do socialize in school, especially when it's very important topics, that the teacher usually kind of shuns it. Like they're not accepting of kids or students socializing. And I feel like if we're in a building with so many people, I feel like it's a life necessity to socialize, no matter what. So I feel like we should try to push teachers to be more open to students, just being human beings.
Can I ask for elaboration? What do you mean socializing? Just chatting in a corner or what?
Well, I mean, just getting to know each other and overall. There's so many students that I see every day and I don't even know their name. And I literally have the same class with them. And I know I'm not the only person in our school that feels this way. Even I know that teachers don't even know a lot of teachers there. They just know whoever's in there.
Okay, just a historical note. A couple of years ago, the SRO report noted the same thing about some classes. There are students who go through the whole semester without knowing any other student's name. So, thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, and I did note that Mark was making notes.
Yep.
Are there any other students in the Zoom who would like to share with the board? Have questions? Okay. Then we will move on to the administrative report.
Can I hear you? Frank is on his way. We left central office at the same time. I chose the highway. He chose the low way.
Always choose the highway.
So I won. This is actually my second trip here this evening. I got here at 5:35, Dad, to look at the space with you, and realized I forgot my materials.
Oh,
It happens.
Yes. So I can go over a few announcements. Maybe we'll start with new hires. So we have 2 new hires to present tonight. They are Sydney Henry, a position as first grade teacher at Green Street School. And Eduardo Jose Juan Melendez Rodriguez at the Career Center for the position of co-op coordinator. So 2 new hires to present this evening.
Is there a motion to approve the new hires?
So moved.
Thank you, Anne.
Did we receive, the packets or whatever on these? I think I got an email about these hires.
It was sent to us.
Oh, it was?
Yes. I received it, yes.
By,
I have some hard copies if they want.
was it by Mo? Did Mo send it?
Mo would have sent that.
I don't know who sent it, but I certainly was able to see a CD.
I didn't get it.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't get it. I don't think I got it either.
okay.
Unless it was with one of the ones that was just like minutes of something else.
It wasn't sent with the agenda.
No, it was not.
I think it was sent separately. I did bring a hard copy.
I'll take a look at the hard copy. I don't, must have just been a mistake. Sometimes people send me things to Robin that are Morgan, which is some other person.
Tim,
and not
another
me.
one.
There's only 1 copy of each one.
Oh, one of each, sorry.
Okay, a couple other announcements.
Wait a minute, we gotta approve the people first, right?
What's that?
We didn't vote
Oh,
on the
that's
motion.
right, yeah.
I think,
I'd love to see that.
May I ask a question? Wow.
sure.
Can you, the second person was, what is the co-op manager or whatever? What was the title? I don't know what that means.
I think Nancy was joining us online tonight. She would be better able to answer that question than myself.
Co-op coordinator helps the students who are moving on to career training and or jobs out in the community, helps to coordinate the whole thing to fit in with their career center education. I don't think Nancy's here yet.
Oh, it's good to know.
Well, thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move? Does anybody else want to review the information, or are we ready to move on? Okay. So all those in favor of approving the new hires, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. They are approved. Mark?
Okay, another proposal for tonight is for Leadership Council Chair position at BUHS. I'd like to propose Stephanie Bona to take on that position. She has been a part of the Leadership Council for a couple of years now.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve Stephanie Bonin as the Leadership Council Chair for BUHS?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving Stephanie Bonin as the Leadership Council Chair of BUHS, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Back to you.
Okay, some other updates I can give is we have parent conferences coming up in the next couple of weeks. At those conferences, we do have student level data of the Vermont VCAP.
Zoom meeting.
Zoom, yeah,
It just crashed.
Zoom just crashed, sorry. Well, it's not me, it's that my computer says that my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, I think as
many of us
I'll get
as
off
possible
the meeting.
should get off and.
I'm connected,
But you can take the blame for it.
You want to make me,
Yeah, well, no, it's not me.
I was teasing, I was teasing.
BCTV is connected
You
to
wanna be
the
the host?
Ethernet.
actually,
Do you wanna give him a host?
make me a co-host, that way if you get dropped,
I-
hopefully.
Oh, yeah, that's
I can't get in to do that for you.
Okay, once you get back in,
Yeah, I can do that.
that way, because maybe I might not get dropped, so then the meeting can stay open at least until you get back on.
We're just getting ready to start talking about the budget.
Frank did it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, he walked in.
He wanted to disguise his entrance, so he unplugged the internet.
That'll be yellow.
It's yours.
So the mics are dead right now, aren't they?
Well, for Zoom they are. The microphone and the camera's still on.
Okay, let's be careful. Let's not blame Frank publicly.
I don't know if
Chair over here.
That's okay, so I'm all right.
I will. I have done it before.
Frank, are you going to project?
Do we?
Are you gonna need to project?
Okay.
Screen share.
Recording in progress.
I'm back on.
I'm back off again.
Yeah, I'm back on, so Zoom one can hear you now, okay?
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone out there in Zoom.
So somehow I'm a host on this and letting people in from the waiting room, which doesn't seem at all correct.
Well, thank you very much, Mindy, for assisting us. We appreciate it.
Glad to help.
It truly takes a village.
I'm going to log out and log back in, and hopefully that will make somebody not me the host. Does that sound right?
Who knows who?
We should assign
Good.
CCTV the
I am the host
Assign somebody.
right now.
Yeah, maybe could Mindy just assign it to back to us as the host and then leave?
I am the host.
Oh,
I'm on my phone. Let me see if I can.
Jeez.
Let me see if I can be that tricky.
Peter, you are now co-host.
Right.
Yep.
this was
I'll also need you co-host if you can get in, Paul.
a worry that folks have.
I am wondering if it makes sense for as many of us as possible to be off the network.
Got it. I'm on.
Who are
I'm
in
going
the
out.
meeting, yeah.
I'm going.
Well, WSESD is my co-host. Let's see. Is somebody else the host now? Is somebody else seeing the participants? I'll log out.
I am, Mindy, but it's not showing you as a host. I don't know
Oh,
why.
good. Okay. Then maybe I'm not the host anymore. That would be more appropriate. Okay, I'm going to mute. Thank you.
Want me to continue?
If the, are we confirmed that, that people in Zoom?
No. Zoom just crashed.
I'm still on Zoom right
Good.
now. So.
Do you see everybody?
Now I'm
I
back
see
now.
Sean.
What the heck is
I see
going
Sean
on?
and the screen's changing, so we still have
Okay.
power.
So it sounds like
Here we are, we're back.
We're back.
We're back.
Okay. So thank you everyone out there and here for your patience and
Okay, so where we left off, I was announcing that Vermont VCAP data, which is the summative assessment that we used this past spring for the first time, state of Vermont. We've had school data, which we've shared. Now we do have student-specific data that can be shared with families. So we will be doing that at parent conference time in a couple of weeks. We also have recorded a screencastify. Brent Tucker has done that to help understand how to read the assessment. It's kind of a little bit overwhelming, so we're providing that level of support for parents as well. Another announcement, the second edition of the SU Connection. We're hoping to get that out early next week. So I'm excited about that. And now we'll shift to the major topic for tonight, which is budget development and timeline. So before I turn it over to Frank, I'll just say, I think the budget time of the school year is a really exciting time. because it's an opportunity to highlight our vision multiple times. Our budget should reflect our goals and highlight the needs that we have to create the best possible experience, school experience for students and staff. So tonight, kind of the kickoff to budget season. And again, that'll provide many opportunities for us to continue to make connections to our action plan and highlight the vision that we have for our students and staff. That being said, I will turn it over to Frank, who has some materials to distribute and talk a bit about the approach and the timeline.
All righty, thank you. Let's see, there we go. There'll be some more coming around. Let's see, if I did want to share a screen, is it best to log into Zoom or just plug in?
We can plug in,
Will the Zoom folks see that?
or you could go on Zoom and share your screen.
Okay, why don't I do that? I wasn't planning on that, but I will, just because it would be more informative. And so there's a single page with a timeline, and then a second document that Mark and I had developed with input from our leadership team to create our framework, our budget.
Didn't crash again.
No, okay. Well, we'll go with the paper version for now. So maybe for starters, we can talk about the planning memo. So if we look at, did that document make it around? Almost. Okay. All right.
Can I make a suggestion, Frank?
Yeah.
If you sit a little more out there, we
Aha.
can all see you as you're. Is
Take
that
the front row.
Is that
Yeah, you gotta take the
yeah, is that terrible?
This is good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the planning memo is something we do internally every year. Finance committee usually takes a little more in-depth look at all things to do with budget development. We had a brief discussion about being, essentially launching the budget development planning cycle for this meeting at the previous finance committee. So maybe just a couple of highlights of this, the double-side document that's a memorandum. What we have here is primarily an internal document for our principals, our leadership team to be focusing on.
Recording in progress.
Focusing on.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
On the key issues facing us in this cycle. So I'll just sort of paraphrase.
So I can't hear them talking. They're muted. Yeah.
Oh, there we are. There we go. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Probably, are you looking at the back of my head? Okay. How's my hair today? There we go. Oh, yeah, nice. Okay. I love this part. So,
Is that your good side, Frank?
Great.
Well, your hair's still there on the back of your head, so
hey,
that's good.
that's surprising. Oh, I haven't had a chance to do the 30 years of whatever the cable TV in public, and I've never gone back and watched one of these. I probably never will either. So the emphasis of the memorandum that we provide every year at this time for our leadership team is, key things to focus on. And generally, it's an extension of the planning that we do in June with the boards, and then August, a real roll up the sleeves. I think we had a 60 slide presentation primarily developed by curriculum and assessment, Bryn and Paul, to really guide us around where are we in terms of proficiency in learning and skills. What are the trends? What are the weak spots that we really need to invest in both professional development, sometimes staffing, oftentimes it's a matter of focus. So that's the intent here of the overview. You see we have some guiding questions, 3 there in the top of this memo. What were the models of success in your school data last year? What investments will replicate and enhance that? So we're obviously trying to make our principals focus on what has worked well, how do we sustain that? Second question, very specific around a continuous improvement goal that the board has discussed with us in last year and ongoing. What kind of staffing is going to get us to 10% more proficiency by spring of 2024, and then sustain that into this budget season that we're developing. And then you see what systems and layers of instruction best support our desired outcomes, and how can we build and support these systems. So, these are not new, but we're trying to be specific and being very intentional as we develop our staffing plans, our professional development, our investments in the public school system for the next year. We cite trends, specific trends around literacy and math proficiency levels. We identify, what we see as maybe gaps, areas we need to improve upon. And then Mark and I refer to the various legislative acts that very much create the weather for public schools in Vermont. And every year there's been for the last 20 years some very significant initiatives that come out of the legislative sessions. We cite a couple of the very significant ones. Fairly soon we will be parsing out this Act 127 and how it affects our school funding formula. You may recall the state's moving away from the old equalized pupil weighting system. They're going to a long-term weighted average system for essentially deriving the tax rate and distributing both the tax burden, but also the state support for public ed. So that's right around the corner in terms of getting some baseline information. And again, there are a reference to, as always, the reliance on engaging our staff for input on what do we need to succeed in the classrooms. The latter half of the memo here is more of a general timeline. So you can glance at that as you wish, but let's maybe jump over to the more detailed version of that and spend a little time looking at some of the sort of key points. I like to start from the sort of the end game as far as budget development goes. So if we're looking at the document, the detailed document, and you look at on the far right, I have the line numbers there, line 27. So that's based on Windham Southeast School District Articles of Agreement. We're the third Tuesday in March for our annual meeting. That's by design. So given that as an end date in terms of vote of the electorate on our budget, statute dictates a lot of the dates that we have to be sure we prepare for to be compliant with statute. So working back from March 19, you see we have to approve a warning no earlier than 40, no later than 30 days prior to the annual meeting. So that would be February 13. That is the first Tuesday in February, so that would be a normal board meeting. Another highlight is for folks that have gone through the process, it's that last meeting in January that we try to be sure to have a final approved board budget, so we can turn that into a annual report, a printed document that gets just widely distributed and of course posted on the website. Of course, we all know printing still takes some time, so that time frame is important because we are obligated to have documents available to the public no later than the 10 days prior to the meeting, but we like to be well ahead of that. One other thing that's prescribed in statute is a official, what's called official public budget hearing that's within 10 days of the annual meeting. So that would be our second meeting in February, the 28th. That's a Tuesday. So then bringing us back to the beginning of this timeline, right from the top of the document, there's a lot of work that's ongoing. Budget isn't like someday you wake up and it's time to start budget planning. It's a continuous process. But with this leadership team, we start moving budget discussion up in our principal meetings, our leadership meetings, individual meetings with central office and principals. So you see those are some of the topics there that we focus on. Obviously, enrollment and what does that trend look like? How are various grade levels and school sites looking in terms of the trend, and then we look at basic statistics, ratios, and as we said, those guiding questions: where are the proficiencies and what are the conditions that our kids face in the learning environment. First draft for the board, typically we look at after the tax commissioner has given us that required estimate for the yield. That really starts to define what fiscally responsible might look like. And then it's December 15th, the statute's require the agency of ed to provide us with that all-important denominator in the very relatively simple formula of how you calculate a tax rate. The denominator is that weighted student statistic. How many kids, after we report to them, are they going to report back to us after they've been weighted according to the school funding formula? That's December 15. Unfortunately, that the AOE hasn't hit that target for quite a few years, but at least we would expect a very preliminary number. After that, we can begin having a projection of what might be considered a fiscally responsible budget. Once we have the tax commissioner's yield in early December and the AOE weighted statistics. But up until then, the administration, of course, is really engaged with principals, teachers, the stakeholders to renew the investment in public ed for the upcoming year. So that's a general overview. Finance Committee generally meets every week, starting, as you see, in mid-November. And we look at the components of the budget. Elementary, generally, initially. Secondary is a second meeting. Focus on revenues on a third meeting. And then see the other topics there listed. Capital plans and so on as we go through the process. Any questions?
A couple of quick ones. When does the Independent Budget Review Committee get involved?
They typically meet with the Finance Committee,
Great.
and they have participated already. They were at our last meeting, and that's typical that they join the finance committee right through February, once the board is voted to approve.
And the second question, in page 1 of this handout, the memo. So you know what kind of staffing is going to get us to 10% more proficiency. That's great that you're focusing on math and literacy. Did you consider social emotional learning as well? It's really not spelled out there. The goals for achieving those goals and what staffing we need to really enhance the social emotional learning proficiencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at that second page there, a little more detail on some of the focal points, and right there at the top, the second block, principles facilitate staff budgeting, planning, and input. You see over there on the right-hand side of the notes, focus on resources needed to sustain recovery plan goals, instructional materials, professional development, building-related requests. The recovery plan goals, I'm sure you recall, are social emotional learning, it is academic improvement, and student engagement. So that is absolutely something that's intentional to be sustained.
Thanks.
Also, Tim, the 10% proficiency goal is around our literacy, but also around our student-to-student, peer-to-peer interactions related to student kindness, as reported on the Panorama survey results as part of the CIP as well. So that, I think it's important to note that 10% proficiency is academic, but also with our social emotional goals, as it's written in the CIP.
Okay, thanks.
Robin?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about kind of the same thing. I'm looking at the part in the memo where it talks about the 30 positions that were added. Now that the crisis point is past, an evaluation of resources that we needed to address the crisis, as assumptions are developed for the post-pandemic budget period. So I know that from a federal funding standpoint, they're considering this funding is over because we're done with the crisis. But it seems like from a social, emotional, or behavioral standpoint that there's still a lot of like high needs going on in the schools. So how are we gonna maintain enough staff to deal with these needs that are still high?
We've had very good discussions, potential discussions around evaluating our systems that were created to deal with the urgency of the social emotional kind of disruption in our families and our schools. And the next steps are looking at those investments. So those 30 positions are primarily social workers, academic support, clinicians, nurses, and it's understanding, are we getting the outcomes that we expect? Are our systems working that were created to address those needs? So that's the work to be done. It has been ongoing, but that's very much a focal point of this work. Is we know that historically we have been on the upper tier in the property tax rates and the income sensitivity provisions in the state of Vermont. We know that our communities have been extremely supportive of our investment in public education. They've supported our budgets, and there's no indication that they're not willing to continue. However, if we sustain the personnel that we have at every level with what has been $15 million in ESSER money over the last 3 years, we will probably get into a very difficult situation for many of our taxpayers where we will be in the highest level of taxing our public. for public education. So it's that balance where we've got to meet our student needs. We've got to look at our systems and evaluate whether our outcomes are what we are satisfied with, and to the extent that they are, we have to sustain them, and to the extent that there are systems that are not matched up well with the expected outcomes, we need to look for changing models of success.
So I want to just, my question may be redundant.
Recording in progress.
In terms of what Robin just asked, but the second bullet, what kind of staffing is going to get us to 10% more proficiency? In my mind, that implies how can we increase our staffing to get to that point? And then it ends and be sustained. So we're really talking about how are we going to maintain current staffing that was put in place as a result of ESSER funds, not increasing.
Well, and that's not really implied to say what additional staff.
It does. Okay, no, I viewed it that way.
It's really what I was getting at is that we look at our investment, we look at our outcomes, we look at systems that have put us where we are in terms of meeting need or not meeting need, and we evaluate whether it's staffing. And really, it has to go hand in hand with professional development, and systems is producing the outcomes that we know our communities expect and need. So it's clearly internally been focused on evaluating our systems. Are we, obviously generally it doesn't work just adding more staff to a problem that doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, that's fine. Recording in progress.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lest you say anything personal. I'm not going to say anything egregious. No. Hey, they're back.
Other questions?
Matt.
Yeah, you had spoken about connecting with stakeholders, particularly around social emotional learning, which is what we're discussing here. I'm wondering if you could speak to connections or conversations that may or may not have been had with Department of Mental Health and the administration's position on Success Beyond 6.
Yeah, I would love to defer. I don't. Tate's not on the Zoom, is he? No. Yeah, I'd love to defer to Tate, but he's certainly not the only one. He's our director of special education, and he's regularly, connected with our mental health partners. I don't know if anyone else.
Success Beyond 6 isn't limited to special education.
Yeah, and then I don't know if anyone else wants to try to tackle that question. It's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, this timeline details, approach to get to, like Frank had refer to the end game, which is the vote of the public. And throughout this timeline, we need to speak with all stakeholders and evaluate what's working, what's not, and if it's not working, how do we make the adjustment so that we're getting a better, bang for the investment. So that includes, parents, PTOs, leadership councils, relationships that we may have with partners in the community, all of the above. It's a thorough process throughout these next few months. We'll report updates on steps that we've made. So there'll be more time to discuss in detail kind of the specific approaches to the development of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and what we found is during the pandemic, so many of our health, mental health services partners were overwhelmed, and we had to make those investments. And that's where I was referring to the nurses, the clinicians, the social workers. Typically, we wouldn't expect to do that to that extent, but many of our partners were overwhelmed and still are, and public school has to, you know, support all kids, and that's a challenge.
If I may ask, what is success past beyond 6?
Success Beyond 6 is an arrangement, to my understanding, is an arrangement between the Agency of Education and the Department of Mental Health in place in the state of Vermont since 1993, where the community, the school board, the school can contract with the Department of Mental Health for either school social workers, clinicians, or behavioral interventionists. There's also provisions around specialized therapeutic schools. But really the onus of it, the importance of it was the clinicians and behavioral interventionists.
Where does that title come from, that name come from?
The legislature.
Beyond 6.
Success Beyond 6, yeah.
Beyond age 6.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not HCRS?
Question.
No, the Success Beyond 6 is statewide.
Because that's who we've been using.
HCRS is the designated agency that acts on behalf of the Department of Mental Health.
Yeah,
And we have not had success.
The clinics are primarily contracted through HCS, and we have many positions from what you're referring to address those needs.
Yeah, but we certainly have invested in social workers and behaviorists. That has been an emphasis of the recovery plan. So again, that'll be a lens that we will absolutely look through as we develop this budget for the next fiscal year.
I think just in keeping with this particular subject, I was on the Independent Budget Review Committee last year, and this was something that we flagged at that time in the report also. But I think that at the same time, I see the work of the social workers at each of the schools, because I think there's a social worker at least accessible at each of the schools at this point. And that wasn't the case pre-COVID. I think the impact of that staffing choice has been immense as far as I can see. And so if there were a budgetary decision at the school level to eliminate or reduce a social worker position, I would hope that, you know, from an administrative perspective, there was a report or presentation to justify that decision, because it seems like it seems like that is such a critically important piece that is hard to it's not quantifiable in the same way as proficiency, and so that's my own personal request would be to see some justification for reductions.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, we're just simply providing an outline tonight, and then share that it's our due diligence to evaluate the programs that we're investing in to ensure that we're making the best decisions we can for students, families, and teachers.
Eva, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. So I have a question about the 10% proficiency and the 54%. So for every school, they have different levels of proficiency rate.
Mm-hmm.
So is the 10% goal for all the schools to get to the 54%, or is that like a sliding scale average of 54% for all the schools?
Yeah, it's a good question, Eva. Ideally, we want to see 10% achievement rates for the entirety of the SU.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just have been conducting data meetings in the past 2 weeks at all of the individual school sites. And one of the framework questions of those data meetings was school site specific, how can we get to a 10% more achievement rate? So it's kind of the SU umbrella as well as each school site thinking about, what are the moves they can make? What are the interventions they can provide to get to that 10% more achievement rate? So it's a sliding scale.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Okay. And then I have a second question with that, because one of the conversations that are being made across the country about data is that as schools get to reach proficiency, What they're noticing is that the students that tend to reach proficiency tend to be of a higher class, more connected with their family. So if you are a foster child, or if you are extreme poverty, you're not going to be a part of that data of reaching those goals. So I'm wondering if you guys had conversations about how that 10% can reach the bottom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And when we hold our data meetings, it's looking at the whole class, and it's differentiating, looking at each individual student and analyzing the supports that are in place for each child. So absolutely, that is taken into consideration without a doubt, profoundly it is.
Yeah, and I never like to let an opportunity to sort of, what do you say, high five some good news with that kind of question. It's an excellent question, and most of the folks here have heard me say this 10 times. If you go to the website, the AOE's website, and you look at the PICA study, the PICA study was all about Rebecca Holcomb recognizing that Vermont hasn't done a great job between closing the gap of the lower and average SCS students over time. And so the legislature commissioned a study, it's been a while now, maybe 2011 or 12, something like that, a statewide study by a national research firm to look for models of success that have addressed closing the gap within what the state would consider sustainable, fiscally sustainable. So Picus Lawrence did the interviews across the state of Vermont, and this is after having done about 40 of these in different other states. It's a study of where are the models of success that a state system could replicate and scale up. So after looking at over 200 schools, at the end of the 200-page report, they've got 5 case studies of exemplars. One was Academy School and one was Oak Grove School. The other 3 one was Colchester, and I'm not remembering the other 2. But out of the 5, 2 were right here in Windham Southeast Supervisor Union. The Academy School, it was how Andy Bertulli was able to take a school that had the same gap where the lower SES students were not performing nearly as well as the upper and average. And over time, he closed that gap remarkably well. And he did it with what the state would consider a staff that could be sustained financially if any other district did the same thing. So Academy was one of the highest poverty schools in their analysis, and those kids, the K through 6 kids, were doing as well or better than the state average, and they're doing way better than their peers that had similar socioeconomic conditions. Oak Grove was similar. Academy was notable because of the scale. It was a 300, nearly 400 student system, and then Oak Grove, it was a similar story, a little different strategy on how the principal accomplished this. This was under Jen
Hemingson?
Jen, yeah, what's her last name?
Jen Hemingson, Jen McCusick.
Yeah, McCusick, yeah. But it was similar in that if you look up that study, it's a great story. I love to try to sort of celebrate the success that we've had, and that's much of what we've been talking about is looking at models of success. It can be done. We have done it. The challenge is just dealing with so many other pressures that have come since then, which, as we know, homelessness, the mental health issues, so many other pressures. But that's part of what we do.
Systems development is at the top of the list that we work on as an administrative team constantly, and you've all seen many examples of that we've presented over the last couple of years. Yeah, it's inspiring, and it's great work, and that's what motivates us.
You said that was the pipe study?
PICA study, yeah, PICA clearance. I don't recall the year, but I could even send it to you if you don't see it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would just, a couple little side bits is I've been attending the data meetings at all of the schools, and there are some really great stories out there of what some schools and individual cohorts where teams have made decisions that have drastically improved data. One example was here at Deverson School. Julian, you want to give like a 10-second?
Sure.
Or not 10 seconds, but maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, because we're already past our time on this.
No, we talked about it at the data meeting, but the students who are currently in 4th grade, they are the students who were in kindergarten when we shut down for COVID. So huge impact, right, on that class, of course, both that year when their education was disrupted in March, and then through 1st grade, because we had the hybrid year and lots of disruption that year as well. And kindergarten, 1st grade, it's all about in-person learning, of course, and students hearing oral language and being present for reading development. And so those students, essentially came into 2nd grade across the district. We were like flashing red on all the 2nd grade classes because we saw the effect in the data. Our 2nd graders, they were like out of this class of 19 students, really had just, I think it's like 1 student proficient in literacy. By the end of last year, we had up into the 70s in percent-wise, and the VT CAP data was 74% proficient. So it's just remarkable, and it had to do with decisions the 2nd grade team made and the 3rd grade team made to completely rework basically their tier 1 instruction entirely based on the data. Parallel teaching, co-teaching, small skills groups that happened intensively over this 2-year period. And the results were amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So Frank, can you send that study to everyone on the board, please?
I can do
Not
that.
just to one person?
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was finished and submitted to the legislature in January of 2016. Just looking at it now, yeah, glad to
Thank you.
send that around.
Anything else very briefly before we move on? Okay, so we are moving on. It's 6:53, we are a few minutes behind, but I think we can try to make that up. The consent agenda, it looks like we just have one thing, which is the approval of the minutes for October 10th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from October 10, 2023?
So moved.
Who was?
Kim.
Kim, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from October 10, 2023, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. Then we are moving on from that.
We're almost back on schedule.
Almost back on schedule, we're getting there. Okay, so now we are public comment on non-agenda items. We have 10 minutes set aside for that. Anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories.
Kelly, the Zoom meeting is offline. Do you want to pause this?
Okay,
and go on
we will
to
pause. Thank you
come
very
back to
much,
this
Robin.
once the meeting is going again?
We will pause that and come back. So, unfinished business, I would be doing the sexual abuse investigation. I don't really have anything to report on that. I can certainly make that statement again when the Zoom comes up.
You won't get involved.
Okay. I'll wait. I'll cue it up.
There is a comment that's made early on that we will do the best to maintain the meeting.
Recording in progress.
In public view, but the meeting has to go on no matter what, whether we're connected or not. So
Yes.
we can pause and pause and pause, but I think the meeting needs to continue.
I wasn't suggesting that we pause. I was just saying maybe we want to wait to do the public comment until the meeting's back. So could we go on to the next thing and then come back to that once.
You both have very important points, and I don't think that they are in opposition. I think they are both building upon each other and helpful to keep in mind. But I will move past the sexual abuse investigation and move to the follow-up on the continuous improvement plan and timing of future Panorama climate surveys. I've set aside 20 minutes for this. I will, Tim, did you wish to?
If I can ask for your patience for 4.5 minutes. I have a proposal to read.
Sure.
So a little background. For the past 2 years, the district has conducted Panorama student climate surveys, as well as Panorama family surveys and a Panorama teacher perception of student survey in the fall and the spring. Panorama surveys, by the way, are conducted in all 50 states and over 1,000 schools. Very research-based surveys. The Panorama Student Climate Survey asks students questions about their social and emotional learning, school climate, and student learning. It is given to students in grades 3 through 12. It is done online. It takes about 30 minutes to complete and is completely confidential. The district needs the results of the survey to understand student SEL needs and to plan and support training for these needs. The board needs the results of the survey to continue to provide oversight and support of district and schools' goals. Questions in the student climate survey are in three categories: school climate, perceptions of the overall social and emotional learning climate of the school; a sense of belonging, how much students feel they are valued members of the school community; and then we have custom questions. For example, I am respected by adults in my school. This school board has shown a strong interest in these surveys. At our July 25th regular board meeting, the importance of conducting school climate surveys was discussed at length. At that time, I believe it was understood that they would be done, continue to be done in the fall and the spring. At the August 22nd board meeting, the board passed a motion unanimously to release the full report of both the fall 2022 and spring 2023 surveys. Later, at the September 26th meeting, the administration presented the continuous improvement plan. One of the district goals for the year was to increase the positive response to a single item on the Panorama survey. Quote, "Students at my school are kind to one another," close quote. More specifically, the goal was to show an increase in favorable responses by 10% by June of this year, a goal that has also been adopted by many of our schools in their school goals. However, just recently at the last school board meeting, at the last board meeting, when I asked when the survey would be done, we were told that it was scheduled for February, and later it was confirmed that it would be done just once a year. This change has not been included, to my knowledge, in any of the reports to the board, nor is it reflected in the in this SD admin calendar, which still has a Panorama climate survey presentation scheduled for May. The board, like the administration, makes data-driven decisions all the time. But maybe this board hasn't expressed our need for Panorama student climate survey results twice a year in order to continue to track data over time. My hope is that revisions to our continuous improvement plan policy, GA, will clarify when and how the board receives data on student climate and academic learning. However, at this time, I would like to make the following motion: that the Panorama Student Climate Survey continue to be administered twice a year in the fall and spring. So my argument against doing it just once a year in February is that the results of a survey done in the middle of winter just cannot be reliably compared to results we've seen in fall and spring. It's kind of like comparing apples to snowballs. We would have to wait until February 2025 to track progress if it was done in February. Also, if there is benefit to students in conducting climate surveys, as we've heard, then there's more benefit in doing them twice a year. The argument about survey burnout just doesn't stand up to a 30-minute survey done online at a time convenient for the student over a 2-week period. This just doesn't seem like a burden. Also, how can schools measure progress on their stated goals in June if the survey is only done in February? How can the board, at the end of the academic year, determine if the interventions, the additional resources and including social workers, the refinement of policies, the effort to engage students and families, the focus on PBIS and restorative practices, how can we learn that we are making a difference, making progress, if we survey only in February? And so I am very much in favor of the motion to continue, as we've done for the past 2 years, of offering Panorama student climate surveys in the fall and the spring.
Okay, a motion has been made. Robin, can you read the motion? Do you have?
That the Panorama Student Climate Survey continue to be administered twice a year in fall and spring.
Is there any discussion?
I would like to hear a response from the administrators.
Does it need to be seconded before we go into discussion? No. Oh, we don't, for the school board, sorry.
I'll start and then turn it over to Paul, but first and foremost, we've been collecting student data for, I want to say 15 years, maybe more. Paul can verify that. It is something that we believe in. It's ingrained in this school district. Student voice is a top priority. We come to work every day for our students, and it is important to hear from them and to take those data points seriously and to make decisions to change the trajectory of the trends in that data. We presented multiple times last year student climate data. In the spring, we consulted with Chris Overtree throughout the school year last year. He presented, along with Paul, in the spring, the results of his work in consultation with all of our schools, as well as a data report, very detailed data report. Recommendation at that time was, we have a ridiculous amount of data around student climate data, and looking from fall to spring compared to spring, felt like we were going through the motions that we didn't need to go through in the fall, when students, frankly, are still getting adjusted to their school sites. I mean, I'm happy to do whatever, but the analysis from the consultant, who is a professional in climate data, sociology, his recommendation to us and to the board was once a year in the spring, comparing spring to spring would be a recommendation. I never remember the board stating in July or directing that we would start this school year with 2 surveys. In fact, I believe we have shared a tremendous amount of data with all of the board members, historical data, and have repeated that recommendation from the spring, that's what we're going into this school year planning to do. A lot of the topics you discussed in the statement, Tim, are embedded into this calendar. Panorama is not the one and only way to judge how systems are working. And there are multiple opportunities in this year-long calendar that will highlight the work that we're doing in all areas of our schools to support our students socially and emotionally, And it's the good and the bad and the ugly. You know, our goal is to improve every day in what we do in all aspects. So that's my response.
Just a point of order. This is the motion for the board. It's not my motion. It's now a motion for the board.
That's fine. I don't know, Paul, if you want to add to that or.
Sure, I was going to sort of reinforce the consultant that the board has hired to provide expertise in using climate surveys told us and told you, the board, last winter, early spring, you know, you really you want to think about this in much longer scale, a much longer term thinking, rather than chasing results fall to spring. In his individual conversation with us, and I'm pretty sure if you review the video, he was saying to the board, you really don't want to do 2. 1 a year is perfectly sufficient. 1 a year is what we used to do prior to a couple or 3 years ago. And it feels to me like it's the longitudinal data that make the most sense to be tracking. And sure, we could move it a little bit later. I would be a little hesitant about a survey right at the end of school. I mean, I kind of think of mid-year as being almost a sweet spot for where we are in the school year. Their kids aren't new and they aren't looking to be gone. And so, I mean, doesn't matter to me. We can move it to. I would not want to move it beyond sort of mid-May, but sure, we could move it to mid-May. And the difference between mid-May and June ain't gonna be a whole lot, right? Other than perhaps, you know, I want to be out of here, so I'm gonna, you know. Anyway, and I guess I sort of feel like I'm wondering if this could have been a conversation rather than a motion.
Well,
But that's my thought.
I'm gonna ask a couple questions. So you're talking about, you have presented over the year, over every, number of years, lots of information is presented. So, and you're talking about a lot of things that are presented in different presentations that are made for the board. When much has been made about the pandemic and how that has affected students, and I'm wondering how, if we had a panorama twice a year, time adjusted from February to a little bit later, and then sometime in the fall, or however it worked out, wouldn't that be better to, we're hoping to make steps forward with students based on having fallen behind academically and having essentially sort of lots of just challenges with social, emotional sort of situations. How do you think that that's being assessed sufficiently? And how, if we wait a whole year, then we don't really have, we've waited to find out that maybe we should have done more, or are there things that you think that are being done already that are already addressing that?
It's in our action plan. Britt referred to it moments ago, and Tim referred to it in the statement. We're looking at 10% growth in social emotional areas as well. Those goals were developed in reflection of the data that we analyzed in the spring of last school year. So we've developed action steps for this school year that we're undertaking right now, and we'll measure the outcome, hopefully a positive outcome, in the spring.
So how are those being measured, though? If it's not being measured through Panorama, and you're saying that there are other things in place to take care of that,
So every year we have 3 benchmark data meetings in the fall, winter, and the spring, where we analyze academic data. We also review behavior and social emotional concerns and data that we have. And we set aside time to set goals for cohorts of students as well as individual students from both an academic lens and a social and emotional lens. So I think we do a very thorough job of that, and it's systematized within our school calendar.
And
Other than Nancy.
Nancy?
So I want to just bring this to a more real world situation. I know all of you have worked outside of the school board. When you think about you start a new job at the end of August, and somebody hands you a survey in October or November and says, how do you like the climate of your new workspace? How do you like your new boss? How do you like X, Y, and Z? How safe do you feel? How kind are your peers? Your answer in November, when you started at the end of August, is much different than your answer in February, because you haven't gotten to know all of the key functions of that workspace. So people typically go through a honeymoon period of about 6 weeks in any new setting. And then we would be surveying them after approximately 8 to 10 weeks. So they're still remembering that honeymoon period. The reality is we don't want to know what the change is from November or October and November until May. We want to measure long-term how kids are feeling about our schools and what we're doing to meet their needs and challenges in school. So if you continue the debate over time of, we're going to collect information in October, what are you comparing it to? Last October, 10 years ago October? Then we're going to collect the same data again in May. We're going to compare it to October. We're going to compare it to 10 years ago in May. We're going to compare it to, I think what you're saying is you want data about school improvement. The reality is improvement for individual students.
Okay.
Did we lose Nancy?
She's still there. She's still talking.
Nancy, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Yeah, she's not muted.
Yeah, the website just went offline too, so I think the internet was interrupted for a little bit.
I think Brenda wanted to make a comment.
Okay. I think echoing that a little bit, I am thinking about the conversation we had at our admin board retreat in June about purposes and layers of assessment, right? And there's so many different layers of assessment that we do in our multi-layered system of support for students. And in my mind, Panorama is like a summative assessment. I think that's a little bit what Nancy was referring to, that it's saying, okay, what is the general outcome of all of this learning that we've done socially and emotionally in a similar way that the VTCAP that Mark just spoke about is a summative assessment of learning. It's saying like, hey, how well did this third grade cohort who started the year at 68% of students at a level 1 finish 74% proficient? Like that really helps us see the growth of where they were prior. I think, in my mind anyway, Panorama is a summative assessment that gives us that point in time. And what I would be concerned about is spring to fall, not that we can't use a half hour of classroom time. Obviously, it's not a huge lift, but the question I have is what is the benefit in terms of data over time? And what is it telling me of how a student reported in the spring? And then when they come right back in the fall, when similar to what Nancy was saying, they hadn't had that breadth of experience in the classroom, in the school, in the grade level to really help inform that. And so typically when we're looking at summative assessments, we're looking at a point in time over the long term. But that's not the only way that we,
Recording in progress.
address social emotional learning with our students. Echoing what Mark was saying, at every data meeting we're having with every teacher in the district right now, there's a portion of the meeting devoted to literacy and math, and then social emotional learning, and what is happening, and how are the behavior plans working, and what's the climate of the classroom, and what additional supports do you need, and what are overall class goals for strengths and weaknesses, which is more like that formative layer of assessment of what's happening in the moment and how are we addressing that day to day. I think other layers of assessment that we have for that in some of our schools are Incidents Plus, where we're looking at behavior referrals that are happening. We're looking at time in and out of classrooms. So these are all more tangible in the moment pieces of information that we get that really help inform our day-to-day responses to support students versus kind of that long-term over time. I think the other benefit of that too is we're having those conversations in kindergarten and in first grade where those students aren't yet able to really take or understand the climate survey in Panorama. It's a really great tool, and it's, having been a third grade teacher, it's a pretty complex tool for some of our students to understand. You need a teacher there unpacking every single question with kids to really understand that. So I think thinking about what are the purposes and layers of our assessment, and I think maybe part of the ask here is building in opportunities to really speak to all of those layers of assessment, to look at our progress over climate. It's absolutely a top goal of every teacher that I talk with. Yeah.
Sorry, Deborah.
Okay, I'm waiting for the chair too. Yeah. So the end of year summative assessment where you see growth. But I'm wondering, what's the starting point for that arc of growth? Is it the prior year's spring summative report? So you're looking at that same child who tests in the spring of the prior year and you're seeing the growth to the next spring. Correct. You could also see that growth, I would think, testing late fall, early winter, to see where that child is at that point, and then arcing it to May, late May. You're going to see that growth there from the beginning of the school year or early on, which seems tighter in terms of gathering data, in terms of the board doing its job of oversight. Just a comment.
Thank you, and just to add to Bryn's point, I think one of my takeaways from Chris Overtree around the climate data is that he indicated that say even if you have a school doing excellent work, right, come in and you make like major changes and you're implementing new programs and it's really making, you know, a difference in day-to-day work of the school. He indicated that you will not see that needle move that drastically. He's just, that's what he indicated. You would not see, you just wouldn't see from fall to a spring, you wouldn't see like that change. And he really encouraged us to not get discouraged, for example. Like you've got all these things in place and you redo the panorama and you're like, what? We expected this to be like totally turned around. And he said, it doesn't work that way. So that was his, you know, he met with us right here and I remember him really making that point with us. It's different than academic data. For example, with our academic data, we will look at that every 6 weeks. Like we will create goals for a student and do an intervention. And we will set a timeline of we're gonna look at this in 6 weeks. We're gonna come back and we're gonna look at progress monitoring data. And with the academic intervention, you will be able to measure, because it's this discrete skill, you'll be able to see, okay, we've seen progress and you can watch the needle move and you can say, oh, whoa, we're on the wrong track. But the climate, survey is very different. It doesn't, also, I don't want us to get, conflate kind of SEL skills and climate, right? If we're looking to measure SEL skills, that is not necessarily measured in a climate survey. Those are two related but different things. And so, we do have the teacher perception survey in Panorama, which does kind of get at SEL We've also been talking in the district about what are some other, measurements of SEL skills that, we could use in our district. They are out there and, you'd obviously want to use a high quality, research-based tool. There's a lot of implications to using one, so that's something to consider,
So
but that doesn't
people
get
do
at
not
it.
go to the meetings anymore, they Zoom in.
They do. Yeah, they do.
We know.
I need permission again.
I have to get in first, Peter. I've been repeatedly trying to reconnect for the last 10 minutes or so.
If we hired a consultant and the consultant's suggestion was to go to once a year on the climate survey, I don't understand why we're not taking that recommendation. I don't see how going to one time, yes, we're not comparing apples to apples, but we're still going to get good data that we can use. And maybe it's more accurate data than what we're getting in the fall and the spring.
This is such a tension conversation, and usually data for me is very fun.
Can you just speak a little louder?
Oh, sorry, I'll take this off. I said this is a very tensive conversation. Usually data is a very fun conversation. So for me, going to 2 surveys is about the sample size. So if you have a extremely small sample size, which we do, to now go to 1, you're not going to get accurate data. When I was doing data and going out and doing field research, I would get a sample and then they would say, okay, go ahead and get me 30 more people. So now I'm interviewing the same people and adding 30 more. And the reason why you go from 1 to 2 is because if you go and you say, okay, we're gonna just do this one survey, you might reach out to the people that you know, the teacher, people that you know would necessarily take the data. The second would get people that wouldn't typically get the data, so people of lower income status, people who have accessibility issues. So more data is actually a good thing. The other aspect is in regards to the teacher participation survey.
Recording in progress.
I unfortunately didn't see that last year, so I would love to see the teacher participation survey. And one of the things in regards to the data, so if you're going into the fall season and you're saying, okay, well, these students are just starting. They're just starting, so how are we gonna get accurate data? You can have open-ended questions, so you can start to see, well, what is the thing that maybe last year that the students are focusing on? What are the parents focusing on? And you can start to develop a plan. So for the survey, it's not a one size fits all. You can actually configure it for each school. So that's the beauty of Panorama. It's not things can change, you can kind of alter it and understand what that information is. So for instance, maybe the student participation survey isn't necessarily that important in the fall, but the teacher participation survey is critical. And maybe that changes year 2, but you're not going to get that information with an extremely small sample size, not reaching out, and then and not having open-ended questions. I think open-ended questions would be fantastic to be able to see those wordings. I did say that before, but that is all.
Ruby?
I think that Robin had her
Oh,
hand up
Rob.
much earlier.
Yeah, okay, there's a lot that's being talked about here. The thing that I originally wanted to ask was, I guess I'm gonna say something before I ask. I feel like people are talking about this as if Panorama is our one chance at the year to get an idea of how students are doing emotionally and in the school climate, because that's the one thing that's called the climate survey, but that isn't the case. There is a lot of opportunities that you guys are talking about where the administrators and teachers are assessing how is the climate in these classrooms or in these schools. But if we want to have data that we can compare over time, we have to ask the same questions. And we have to not ask open-ended questions because that doesn't allow you to compare the answers and then measure improvement in a percentage type of way. So I feel like I don't know the names of all the different ways that students and teachers are interviewed about how things are going for them, but I do feel like it's very important to have things where we have open-ended questions and ask people how they're doing. I don't think that our longitudinal data, like year-to-year assessment, is the right place for that. But what I wanted to originally ask was, I think that it would illuminate things a lot if you could explain why did we start doing the fall surveys? Because most of the time we have not been doing that. So if we could understand why did we start doing that, then I think it would help people understand why is the recommendation to now stop it.
I think it was, we went on lockdown. Kids were not allowed to go to their school physically. It's a traumatic experience for a community. So when we opened back up, it was like, okay, let's see what the response is in the data from this drastic change in lifestyle in the beginning of the school year, and then compare it at the end of the school year. So very much COVID related and wanting to understand kind of where we were at, big picture. Coming back from a significant, obviously, worldwide pandemic.
Okay.
Sean had his hand up, and I'm gonna come to you now. Sean?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Unfortunately, because of the technology here tonight, all the people online have been extremely marginalized. And I'm concerned that this is a very important question. And if, when during the vote, we can't get in, I feel as if, it'd be extreme marginalization of 1/10 of the board, speaking only for myself. Thank you.
Matt?
I had a a question about information. Is there a financial difference between one survey versus two with Panorama?
No.
Other than teacher and student time, minimal.
Relative. Yeah, I think we're hearing from all the administrators, all the school people around kind of how we feel about this, and I hope that's considered. We're trying to build systems, MLSS systems. We have so many data points already that we're trying to build systems that we can look at that data. We're not there with the data we have. We have so many data points that we're looking at. We're trying to build systems to analyze it with our leadership teams and break it down and at the team level. We had an awesome presentation the other day at our SU leadership by Steve Ventura, and he said, don't collect data for the sake of collecting data. We have this data. We know there are certain key areas that we know are really important that Chris Overtree helped us identify. Those points aren't changing from spring to fall in a significant way, but they can change over time. So I just advocate that we consider the one time a year, because I don't know if we have the systems to really take a strong look at that data with the overwhelming amount of data we already have. Just to plug.
Ruby, and then Bryn, very quickly, and then we're moving on because we are already beyond our time.
I feel a little bit at a disadvantage because I think some of this conversation occurred before I started on the board, but I had a recollection of actually hearing at the board level a presentation that acknowledged that we were moving from 2 to 1 in terms of the surveying, and it sounds like that might have been in the spring. And it sounds like perhaps the board doesn't remember that, but I recall that wording, and I must have just been as an observer watching on Zoom. And I guess I just want to acknowledge what I'm hearing in the room, which is a lot of frustration. And there's frustration from the administrators, as have been, mentioned, around that this is one data point and there's lots that is being considered, and really a feeling of lack of trust of our administrators. That's what I hear. I also hear from my fellow board members that there's a feeling of a lack of detail being shared, and that there might be other data points, and you may feel, or the administration may feel that is being shared, and there's lots of presentations being shared. My sense is that it's possible that the format in which they're shared and the way in which they're shared isn't hitting the board in the way that we want to hear it. So that's what I hear. So I would love to just cut through that frustration and acknowledge that we're all trying to do the same thing. We really are. And the two pieces that haven't come up, I think, in this moment, but are a theme in terms of the board's conversation about the climate data is there's, I think at the Policy and Amendment Committee, this is being discussed, although I'm not on that committee, haven't been in all the conversations, but there's a way in which the CIP, there's policy around CIP, that there's intended to be a committee or a way in which stakeholders are involved at many levels of the process. And I think that hasn't manifested in the way that the board is happy with. That's my sense. Those are my words. But I think that would be something to consider. Is there a way in which having board, a representative from the board involved, to have a voice, to understand it, then to bring it back to the board and advocate at the level of not just for the administration, but for that process as a whole. That I think is something to consider. And then something else that has come up numerous times, at least in my recollection, is a question of if the board has hired Chris Overtree, are we happy with Chris Overtree? And this seems confusing to me because it feels to me that the board may have hired Chris Overtree, but Chris Overtree is primarily working with the administration to develop things. Am I wrong about that?
Well, that was just last year. He was hired last year to work with all of the schools and then to provide a presentation in the spring. And the board hired Chris to do that work. We embraced it and really enjoyed our work with Chris. We're not actively working with him this year, but we felt like there were some great takeaways from our work with him last year.
And my sense from my reflection on what I hear from this board is that that's not necessarily the same that this board doesn't feel that quite the same way, a sense of positivity around this experience with Chris Overtree. And I don't think that we can unpack all of that now. And so I would go back to what I heard Paul say of I do think this is time for to open up a discussion. And it may be that it needs more time than in this public space. So I think my thinking is that we assemble some kind of an ad hoc group that can actually have deeper conversations and return back with hopefully some understanding and kind of alignment.
Bryn?
I just want to speak very quickly, even to your point about the survey size, and just a clarification that the Panorama Student Climate Survey is the same sample size each time because it's given to all the students in the school. I think where that sample size, your point is really well taken, is in terms of our family surveys and trying to get better return rates to get more information there. But just to clarify, the Student Climate Survey, it's not really an opt-in, you're in class, so you take the survey. Yeah, for all of our students.
Could I respond to that, please? So we have low participation for the surveys. So when you take a second survey, our goal, because one of the things that we had talked about at one of the meetings was, how do we get people to participate? They don't have to do it. It's optional. So if we have a second survey and we make it like a pizza party or something, like an incentive, we might get more participation. So my wording in regards to the sample size is getting a larger pool and actually getting like more accurate data.
It's not optional, Eva, I just want to clarify, it's not optional. It's given in school, in place of a math lesson to all of the kids in the classroom.
My understanding in the high school is very different, but it's an option in advisory. But the point I want to make is, we have district goals. I take those very seriously. I look at very carefully at school goals. And one of the goals states, one of the three goals in high school is to increase the one item on the survey by 10%. Students are kind to each other. As a researcher myself, I take issue with taking one item from the survey. You have a suite of questions in surveys that measure what you want to measure, but taking one item is just not valid. Also, we look at best practices in other places. I have quite a few friends in DC. Every single school in DC uses Panorama twice a year. If you want to look at a model for rolling out Panorama for informing parents and public and students, look at what DC schools are doing. They're doing it very well. So this is not unique to having it in the fall and the spring. But the question is, if we take those goals seriously, well, why is the only data we're using to measure progress?
Recording in progress.
It assigns the next.
Here we go. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
I think just keep talking.
Okay. So this has been quite a lively discussion. We are well past where we should have been. So I guess we are going to vote. Robin, I'm sorry, can you read the motion again?
Yes. Tim moved that the motion was that the Panorama Student Climate Survey continue to be administered twice a year in fall and spring.
All those in favor of the motion as read, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are we waiting for Sean to get back online?
Yes.
We're not, yeah, Zoom is not on.
It took me 10 minutes to get it back on last time it was off. I can call Sean.
Yeah, why don't you just call him on the phone and do that?
The answers. Try his phone number. Hi, Karen. This is Ann Beekman from the school board. We're having trouble with Zoom and
recording in progress.
On phone.
Okay. Recording stopped.
I'm not sure how to.
Yeah, it's really
You
frustrating.
can try it and we'll see what Ann says. She's the expert on Robert's rules.
Hi, Sean. We're having so much trouble that I agreed to connect, like call you on the phone. So you might have an opportunity to vote. Let me put you on speaker. One moment.
What has happened? Because I haven't been able to read anything.
We have started the vote.
Okay,
Well,
so,
we didn't-
Sean, I'm gonna ask Robin to read the motion again. We started to vote, I didn't realize you were, not connected, so Robin I'm gonna ask her to read the motion again. Please.
Okay, can you hear me, Sean?
Sean?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, is this Robin?
Yes. Okay, the motion was that the Panorama Student Climate Survey continue to be administered twice a year in fall and spring. And then there was a lengthy discussion about whether that was necessary or not.
I can't hear you, but I know what the motion was. If
Okay.
the board just wants to continue with the vote, that would be fine with me.
Okay.
All those in favor of
I
the,
have a voice.
all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Nay.
Nay.
I abstain, no, I am opposed.
Okay, so,
John Murphy is opposed to the motion.
okay,
Okay, we have that, Sean, thank you.
so, Robin,
Nay.
Matt,
Nay.
Tim,
Yay.
Deborah,
Yes.
Ann,
Nay.
Kim?
Nay.
Recording in progress.
Yes. So that was Eva,
Nay.
and that was Ruby,
And Sean was nay.
and Sean. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 opposed and 2 in favor.
I think there was 3 in favor.
Yes, Eva was in favor as
Oh,
well.
I'm sorry.
Eva, Deborah,
Eva.
and Tim.
I'm happy I spoke that up, that way I can
Could you take the phone
correct the
off
record.
speaker, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you take the phone off speaker?
Take the phone off speaker.
Okay. So I stand
Yes,
corrected,
I
there
am
were 6 opposed and 3 in favor, so the motion is not approved. Okay. So, is there any, very quickly, before we move on from this, we can certainly take the topic up at a following meeting if we wish to. Okay, so we are moving on
Can we take a break?
at 7:42, and we will take a 5-minute break. So 7:47, please be back here. We'll start.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we are back at 7:48.
While we have a moment, to all the folks at home, we're very sorry about the Zoom, we're having internet connectivity problems. I keep trying, so we're doing the best that we can under the circumstances. Thank you.
Yes, and just, I'm so sorry from Dummerston. We never have internet problems during the day. It's like fast speed, and our tech person and everybody checked it out today and thought we were good to go. And so we don't know. So
Okay, we
we'll
appreciate
figure
the
it out.
hospitality.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really-
I'm so
being
sorry.
here.
I'm so sorry. I feel terribly.
I really want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Julianne, thank you to you, Dan. Your hard work in setting this up. Thank you to Peter.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, because it was extraordinary to be here early and to see everybody being so well organized. And so again, thank you for your hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb, for bringing that up. Okay, so we are going to go back to public comment on non-agenda items, 10 minutes. We're going to try to capitalize on the Zoom working at the moment. Is there anyone in Zoom who would like to share anything, questions, comments, concerns, public comment? You see any hands up? Second call for public comment, non-agenda items. Liz.
Yeah. Yeah, this happened the last time there was a meeting at Dummerston. Is there a way that we can tell if Zoom access is going to be available from the different school sites? There must be some way to figure that out. So that's just a thought.
I'm not sure, that's not my particular specialty, so I'm going to once again turn that issue over to the administration and ask that they just do whatever they can in the future for other meetings. But thank you, Liz, for asking the question. Any other, anything else for public comment, non-agenda items? Hearing none, we are moving on at 7:51. We are going back to the sexual abuse investigation. I have not heard anything further. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns that they would like to share? Okay, hearing none. Okay, Mindy?
Is there any prediction, is there any news on when there will be a report?
I do believe that Attorney Goddard is back to work. I don't know in what capacity as far as full-time, part-time, and whatnot, so I don't know where that is. I know that our attorney is very aware that we are very eager to have something to share with the public and is advocating for us to receive something that we can share. So I'm not absent going to Attorney Goddard's office and going through her computer. I have no idea what else that we can do in order to get this accomplished, but I will again, which I would not do, of course. But I will again this evening send an email to our attorney to reiterate that we are eager to obtain that information and see if we can try to have it for the next meeting. I will remind of the request that was made to indicate differently on the agenda. If we have something to share, that way it would be very clear to the public whether they should make sure to attend or whatnot. So that's all I have for that topic. So
Thank you, Kelly.
I'm sorry?
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Okay, you're welcome and thank you for attending. 7:53, we are moving on. We did the CIP, so now we're on to the policy and amendment presenting for readoption. Deborah?
So there are 3 policies for readoption, and I'd like to present each one separately as a motion. Policy and Amendment Committee presents, this is a motion, presents the following for readoption. E10, School Crisis Prevention and Response.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the policy for E10? Oh, I'm sorry, did you?
I just made the motion.
Yeah,
Right.
there I go.
Mhm.
The motion's already made. My apologies.
That's okay.
All those in favor of approving, readopting E10 School Crisis Prevention and Response, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstention? Okay.
Next motion, Policy and Amendment Committee presents for readoption E15, Security Cameras.
Okay, clearly the motion has been made. All those in favor of readopting E15 security cameras, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
The Policy and Amendment Committee makes a motion to readopt F9, Student Substance Abuse Prevention.
All those in favor of adopting F9 Student Substance Abuse Prevention, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstention? So we are moving on from unfinished business to new business. Policy and Amendment Committee.
Policy and Amendment. The committee, the Policy and Amendment Committee presents for a first reading C9, Notice of Non-Discrimination. So in terms of a first reading, this is a 10-day reading period. Please read the policy. We invite comment. And send an email to Deborah Stanford, to Ann Beekman, to Eva Nolan, to Tim Maciel, please. And the Policy and Amendment Committee presents for a first reading D11, Public Complaints About Personnel. Again, this is for a first reading, and the Policy and Amendment Committee presents for a first reading F2, Bus Discipline. And again, we really encourage everyone on the board, administrators, the community at large to read these policies and consider them. This is for a first reading. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question about the bus discipline.
Yeah.
It seems like the policy is focused mostly on like what will be the consequences for students. But I was just wondering, you know, we don't staff the buses. We contract to a different company. And what options do we have to address it when the discipline or way of interacting with students on the bus by the driver and staff is not aligned with our district's policies?
Then we communicate with the bus company, share what our expectations are in terms of how responding to student conduct is done. But we have regular communication with dispatch as well as with individual drivers at pickup times. We've done things like, bus safety school sings, where we've kind of celebrated what the expectations are on the bus. We've invited bus drivers to our schools to be a part of those traditions. So it's something that we contract with Cosmescus, but we try to stay in pretty close communication and give feedback of things that are happening. And it's pretty much a conversation throughout the school year. If routes need to change based on the length of time kids are sitting on the bus, all the way down to
recording in progress.
Discipline issues that bus drivers are facing. That
Recording in progress
is shared, and we try to work together.
So this is an issue that came up in the committee. The connection between the school environment, and how issues on the bus by the driver are handled. And the original policy was viewed as, or perhaps it's my notes, as too extreme, without, intervention on the part of the school. Should there be an issue on the bus. So in the policy, the revision, the last paragraph reads, in the event that the administration determines that a student is to be removed from the bus, parents and caregivers will be given the opportunity to appeal that decision to their school administrator, which changes the tone of the policy, that it is not simply the decision of the bus driver. So,
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
I don't feel comfortable getting into more detail about my question right now, but I will ask it privately.
If you would put it in an email, that would be great, because I think it's really important that comment be shared with the entire committee, rather than being a conversation.
Okay.
That would be really appropriate, I think. Thank you.
Depending on the nature of whatever it is. So
Okay.
it may be first step administration, but
Okay.
we can evaluate that after. I
But
guess.
it will come back to the committee. Thank you.
Okay, then we are moving on to EES Request for Approval of Carryover Funds from 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. And I'm going to hand it over to Deb Katz, who has waited patiently here for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I'm here to ask your permission to carry over $458,735.95 from our Head Start and Early Head Start fiscal year that concluded on June 30th. And we want to carry that into the present funding cycle that began on July 1st. Our books are finalized and this is the magic number. Just a little background as to why we have that much money to carry over. Part of that was money that we actually carried over a year ago, 56,000 of that, for a kitchen project at Bird Street, and we were not able to find a contractor. So we're still looking, although we've revised the plan in that we have downsized the scale of the project some, and we'll be able to use our facilities team to do a lot of the work and then subcontract out the electrical and plumbing, and we purchased the equipment. So we decided to make that revision and be a little more realistic with what we're dealing with in today's society. And the rest of the funds, as you can imagine, are from staff positions that are still vacant. And if you'll remember, you approved a change of scope application that went in July. We're still waiting to hear. And that's recommitting those funds into higher salaries for staff and a reduction in our enrollment that reflects the classrooms that we haven't been able to open because we haven't been able to find teachers. And so basically, we are asking for your permission to carry that over into the existing funding year. And we'll use those funds to hopefully complete the kitchen renovation project. And we will provide funds to continue to pay staff retention bonuses and staff wellness bonuses until our change of scope is approved, and then those funds will be redirected into permanent increases in staff salaries.
Is there a motion to approve the carryover of $458,735.95 from the 2022 fiscal year to the 2023 fiscal year?
It's actually
2022 to 2023 to the move to the 2023-2024 fiscal year.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Sure.
So can you kind of explain the SU versus the SD? So this is, I guess I thought this was an SU budgetary thing, but I guess it's an SD thing.
Right. The Head Start and Early Head Start grant is actually administered through the Windham Southeast School District.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Wonderful. And we are moving on at 8:04. To board matters training, leadership council updates. Do we have any?
Yeah, the high school leadership council met last week, without a chair, but now we do have a chair. But to quote Mark Twain, travel is fatal to prejudice, bias, and narrow-minded thinking. With that thought in mind, I was delighted to find out that the high school is resuming its travel program, and 62 11th graders have signed up for a trip to Switzerland and Italy. So that's the good news for the high school. It makes me think, though, what about the students who couldn't afford it? There's always that. It's great for students who can afford it. It's mind expanding. It's a lifetime memory. But maybe the district might give some thought to how to fund students who want to go but can't afford it.
That's a good question. Thank you very much for bringing that to us.
I have a question for Mark. I guess I thought that we would be hearing at this meeting the reappointment of, there was like a mass reappointment. And so I'm wondering if there's a plan in place for that, and also do you have a plan, or is there a timeline by which you are going to have that annual
Orientation.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, the hope would have been this week. We still have some school sites who are having trouble identifying a board chair, frankly. So the goal is to continue some outreach this week. If we're able to identify board chairs before the next board meeting, we would then conduct our orientation. But yeah, it hasn't been, last year there was a lot of participation. This year, for whatever reason, it's been harder to get folks to sign up for leadership councils.
So likely in the next month, hopefully, maybe we might have appointments.
Yeah, I mean, I was initially hoping we could do an orientation next week, but then as you were speaking, I realized we would have to have those names approved before doing that. So that would push us into right after the November meeting.
Unless the board wanted to delegate.
I'm sorry? Okay. So we're moving on to board subcommittees, communication council.
I don't actually know why that's on the, do you remember what that was? Did I ask for something to be? I did.
Thought you did, and if I can read your email.
Let me look at my texts, Ruby. I feel like that's where we discussed this.
Ruby,
yeah,
you asked it on Tuesday, October 17th at 1:10 a.m.
No, it was at 1:10 a.m. Sorry.
Should I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. it's clean.
Lightness.
I want to ask that we plan for central office to post minutes and agendas for committees that are not board committees.
Oh, yeah.
Most specifically CPAC, which has posted a comment to social media for the second time, basically asking to be included. I also think there is a district social justice committee, and I'm honestly not sure what other committees there might be. But I'd like to make sure this is discussed. It could be an opportunity for the district to think about reorganizing how minutes and agendas are presented to make it easier to find things rather than a big chronological list. But I think asking for their inclusion is a first step.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And so I did end up reaching out to Michaela Sims about that, asking if they wanted to have the agendas and minutes posted on the website or elsewhere, and she said no, because it's mostly a staff focus for their committee. So, and they also have their own social media presence. So she said at this time we don't need any help promoting this, except when it comes time to plan the May. Is it still called Diversity Day in May, or is that one working to justice also?
I'm not sure officially about the May.
Okay. Well, anyway, for planning that event, they would appreciate community participation, but except for that, she said they didn't really need those ones promoted widely.
But I do think the issue about taking another look at the website and how it's organized, because to find even policy, for example, you actually have to move down chronologically as against maybe having it clustered in a way that, so the website is great. I think now that we're using it with greater frequency, we might want to consider other ways of organizing the data.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that, and I also wonder to what this kind of refers back to something that's come up at the Communications Council a number of times. The Communications Council is a council of, it's a subcommittee of this board, and there's not a district level communications team or
Like central office level.
Central office level communications committee. There might be a team or people who do that work, but I don't know how to. I feel like this has come up before, kind of finding a better way to organize the minutes or things like that is more useful, and I don't know how to pass that information on in a productive way. That's one piece. The other thing that I think the board can have an impact on is this in conversations with people on this particular committee and seeing their activities on social media and a reach out about trying to get involvement. I just wonder, I just don't understand to what extent, could we as a board actually designate a board member to participate in that committee? Is that welcome? Would they want that? Are there other committees or levels that we already kind of send a designate to or could that would help to inform this group of the workings of those other groups?
Well, I actually, at the last WSESU meeting, I advocated that a board member should attend the CPAC meetings, and then Anne said that she would.
Okay, so because it's an SU.
Because it's special ed focused,
special ed,
that's the SUs.
Yes, I'm now representing the board, and I went to the first meeting since that happened last week, so good.
But that's I don't know. I feel a little bit. I don't understand what other committees. This committee kind of pops up now and again because there's so much voice being, put out there. But I wondered what other committees there might be. There's the social justice one, which Robin spoke to. I don't know if there are other committees that board members are involved in or that are not necessarily designated board subcommittees. That was a question. I don't know if we need to just piece it apart now, but someone, with more longevity than I have on this board might have more insight into it.
So just bouncing off of this email, I know, Paul, you talked about the fact that the work on the website is now being done in-house. I remember that came up a while ago. And I wonder how much flexibility there is to tweak it.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So we can just send that request to Mo? Who's the person to talk to about
To tweak the
suggestions
website?
for the website?
You?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And back to the first question of the email, is that cool with the other board members if the WSESD board Facebook page begins also posting the CPAC agendas? It's not a body of the board, but they've asked for support in promoting their meeting, so is that fine with everyone?
Yeah.
Are you making a motion?
Sure. I move that we share the CPAC agendas and minutes on the WSESD board Facebook page.
Is there any discussion?
The only discussion I would have is I would assume that would mean that the agenda would be posted on either the SU or the SD page. And it doesn't matter which. The SD board Facebook page posts SU and SD agendas and sometimes minutes.
Question. Would it make sense to consult with Tate as the organizer of the CPAC?
Yep.
About this issue? Just a question.
Okay, so I'll table that motion until we can ask Tate and then we can discuss it at the next meeting.
So are you withdrawing your motion?
Recording in
I
progress.
think you have to withdraw it, right?
Or can I just table it and then we can continue discussing it at the next meeting?
Recording stopped.
I think we need to have a motion to table it.
Recording in progress.
I don't know if you need to add the motion. I mean, I
Okay,
think you can,
I'll just,
you can
whatever.
table it.
I'll withdraw it and then we can discuss it at the next.
When I
agenda.
send you the email asking for things to put on the agenda, I
Okay.
can certainly include that, and I will include that on the agenda, and it will be a new fresh item. Okay, so now board training resources, I just wanted to say that, I want to thank Tim for sending out a number of resources. If people haven't gotten them, please let me know, and I will make sure that the ones I get are including everybody else. And I would like to encourage everyone else, if you see things, articles, websites, anything that you think is helpful, to please feel free to share them with the board. As Ruby.
I guess I thought that this would be a more pointed discussion about a particular subscription that the board could have to a certain resource. But I don't, is that not being discussed now?
There is a subscription that we're looking into, and we've not gotten quite to the point where,
Cool.
so that's.
Okay.
Well, it's just talking about Ed Week.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we haven't kind of gotten quite to where,
Got it.
so.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking the question. Okay, so now I see that we are on to, we're really at the end? We're really at the executive session? My goodness. We really are.
We ended up ahead of the time somehow.
Well, almost, because, well, yes, the agenda says
8:20.
8:20, I had 8:10. But, yeah, so is there, let me do this the way I'm supposed to do this.
That we would,
Yes.
especially after such huge.
Executive session.
Okay. Thank you very much. And actually, I want to take the opportunity, now that I'm looking at this binder, to say that our new board member, I didn't say welcome to Matt earlier, but welcome Matt, he's done a great job this first meeting.
We just blended right in with his free chocolates.
And he has indicated how much he really has enjoyed the binder, so that's a win for us. So thank you, Deborah, for that. Thank you, Matt, for giving your input. So I'm going to ask if there is a motion for a finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that a motion to go into executive session under page 1 V.S.A. 313, 1D grievances other than tax grievances will be made. Is there a motion for such finding?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Deborah. All those in favor of the finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, we have found that. Is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313, 1D grievances other than tax grievances, and inviting in Mark Spino and Pietro Lim?
And can we invite Frank?
I can't invite Pietro if I can't connect to Zoom.
I'll call him.
Okay, yeah.
And inviting Frank in. Thank you very much, Robin. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. All those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We are in executive session at 8:20, and there will be no action taken.